So now what we're going to do is we're going to use trigonometry to solve for the unknown side of a right angle triangle. We have a right angle triangle. We have x is going to be our unknown side. And what we're going to do is we're going to be looking to solve it. This is an angle that's given. It turns out that if you have three things in a triangle, it means you could solve it. In this case, we know the right angle, we know this angle, and we know that side. That means we could solve it. Three angles only counts as two things, though. If you followed that, great. If you didn't, that's really a bit of a side point. So we're going to start off by naming the sides. So we have to name the sides. So the hypotenuse is always going to be this one. So the hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. Then what we have, that's our chosen angle. So this side becomes the opposite, and this one becomes the adjacent. So opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent. Now, we know the ratios. So the ratios are sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent equals opposite over adjacent. There's actually a mnemonic to remember that if you don't actually like memorizing things. They sometimes write it as SOHCAHTOA. And SOHCAHTOA is essentially just these three things over here. It's sine is opposite of hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. And so if you remember this word, SOHCAHTOA, that's essentially a way of recalling all of the trig ratios. You don't have to do it. You could just memorize the formulas, and that works as well. So for example here, let's say we do sine. And remember, we can't write sine alone. Sine needs to be sine of something. So we're going to write sine of 20. And sine of 20 is the opposite over the adjacent. The opposite is x. The adjacent is 73. And so sine of 20 equals x over 73. And that's a good start. So now we just have to go and solve this thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to, we want to get the x alone. So we're going to multiply both sides by 73. The 73's cancel, chink chink. And we get 73 times the sine of 20 equals x. So we're going to put it in the calculator. Before we put it in the calculator, we're going to do a little test. We're going to see what is the sine of 30. And we're going to make sure that the sine of 30 is in fact 0.5. That means our calculator is in degrees as it should be. So it's going to be 73 times the sine of 20. 73 times the sine of 20, which is 24.967, which is going to be 24.97. And that's in centimeters, so this is also going to be in centimeters. So x is going to be in centimeters. Traditionally, we round side lengths to 1 decimal and angles to no decimals. If I was going to do that here, this is confusing rounding, unfortunately, but it would be, it would actually round to 25.0 centimeters. And that would be the answer. So using trigonometry, given these things, this side is 25 centimeters. Next example. I have the triangles pre-made actually this time. So what we want to do here, same idea. I'm going to kind of write my mnemonic word on the top. SOHCAHTOA. We're going to maybe use that. So that's our special angle. So we know that, well, this is always the hypotenuse. Not a bad plan to start off focus on the hypotenuse. This is our angle, so this becomes the opposite. And this is the leftover, so it becomes the adjacent. Okay, so the sine of 33 is opposite over hypotenuse. So the sine of 33 is opposite. We don't actually know the opposite though. So it's who knows over the hypotenuse. So in this case, actually, the sine ratio was not really useful. So That was useless. Useless. So now we move on. Let's try the cosine ratio instead. So I'm going to say the cosine of 33 is, so cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, which is going to be x over 28. Okay, that's looking a bit better. This is the one we're going to use. So we multiply both sides by 28. 28, 28, and chunk chunk, these cancel. And so we end up with 28 cos 33 equals x. So we're going to have to put that into the calculator. 28 times the cosine of 33 is 23.48, which is going to round to 23.5. And the units here are meters. So x is, in this case, 23.5 meters.